Jim Morrison, Shaman of the New Age. In the early 60s, a student named Carlos Castaneda was an anthropology student at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and he collected information on medicinal plants under the tutelage of Don Juan, a Yaqui sorcerer. At the same time, a film student at UCLA, named James Douglas Morrison, was also experimenting with medicinal plants found in the deserts of the American Southwest. Ray Manzarek, the future keyboardist for The Doors, met James Jim Morrison while they were both attending UCLA. We were graduates. An MFA, a master's degree, for me, and a bachelor's degree for Jim, both in cinematography. Apparently, they were both introduced to lysergic acid diethylamide, commonly known as LSD, while they were both attending UCLA. Ray Manzarek narrated a strange story about one of Jim Morrison's acid trips while they were living together in Los Angeles. He said he saw a satyr following him from across the street. A little satyr with horns and pointed ears, a man's head and upper body, walking on two goat legs. A little Greco-Roman satyr. Pan, the god of the forest. And this little satyr was popping in and out from behind parked cars and waving to Jim, clowning and joking and making silly faces. Jim later said he thought the satyr was inviting him to dance or to frolic. He said the little forest dweller followed him for about 5 blocks. Always staying on the opposite side of the street, never crossing over to Jim, but continually beckoning him and smiling and just carrying on as fawns are wont to do. As Jim approached Fraser, the satyr simply leapt behind a palm tree and was gone. "I was just followed home by a satyr," he said as he walked in the door. His eyes were wild and blazing. He looked not unlike a satyr himself. "Is it still with you?" I asked, sure that he was on acid. He looked back outside, behind him. "No, he's gone," he said. Ray Manzarek knew the significance of satyrs and Pan as he explained in his book. Now Jim Satyr was a most appropriate hallucination for a Dionysus-like individual. Satyrs are the familiars, the attendees of Dionysus. Also of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and revelry. They mill about Dionysus, waiting for the fun to begin. They wait for the maenads, those frenzied women who take part in the wild, orgiastic rites that accompany his worship. They wait for the Bacchantes. They wait with Dionysus for the rock concert to begin. For the groupies to appear. Of course, for the past 100 years, public education in the United States and in Europe did its insidious work and made people completely unprepared and defenseless against the supernatural and against demonic spirits. Now we are seeing the end result of this flood of demonic activity, which starting flooding into our culture in the early 1960s. John 10:10 "The thief comes not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." Ray Manzarek witnessed the effects that drug use and alcohol had on his quiet, introspective, intellectual friend Jim Morrison, and it wasn't pretty. They drank too much. They indulged in strange chemical substances, Asmodor, belladonna, Jimson weed, just to see what they would do. If they had read about a crazy drug, they wanted to try it. No heroin, however. Just weird shit, and the more arcane, the better. He told me about seeing the green lady on belladonna. The Jimson weed had opened the trapdoor to Jim's id, and out had come the character called Jimbo. A good old boy. A racist. A fat man who liked the power of domination. A monster. A monster of skin. The creature who would eventually take Jim to Paris and kill him? Ray Manzarek's description of Jim Morrison's transformation was based on modern psychology's totally inept understanding of the spiritual dimension. Jim Morrison was a modern Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde example of the drug-induced spiritual transformation caused by dabbling in what the Bible calls sorcery. Revelation 9:21 "Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts." Sorceries, pharmakia, medication, pharmacy, that is, magic, sorcery, witchcraft. Even the name of the band itself is in homage to William Blake, who wrote in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." And Aldous Huxley takes that line and calls his book on mescaline experimentation The Doors of Perception. And Jim takes that line and calls the band The Doors. Mescaline is a naturally occurring proto-alkaloid, known for its hallucinogenic effects comparable to those of LSD and psilocybin. Mescaline is a drug derived from certain cacti found in the American Southwest, specifically peyote. Ray Manzarek later found his other two bandmates, John Densmore and Robbie Krieger, in a class that was teaching Indian mysticism. In his book, Ray explains the excitement he experienced while attending the class. Jerry was carrying on in much detail about the void and our relationship to it, and the pure energy. All the marvelous things that Indian mysticism and Eastern spirituality and Zen Buddhism and LSD, peyote, and mescaline open up to you. And I'm nodding my head yes, yes, yes. I agree, that's what I saw. Another interesting book that mentions the weirdness surrounding Jim Morrison was Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, by David McGowan. It is the first week of August, 1964, and U.S. warships under the command of U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison have allegedly come under attack while patrolling Vietnam's Tonkin Gulf. This event, subsequently dubbed the Tonkin Gulf Incident, will result in the immediate passing by the U.S. Congress of the obviously pre-drafted Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which will, in turn, quickly lead to America's deep immersion into the bloody Vietnam quagmire. Before it is over, well over 50,000 American bodies, along with literally millions of Southeast Asian bodies, will litter the battlefields of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. It was also not, as we have also seen on more than one occasion, an attack that was quite deliberately provoked. No, what the Tonkin Gulf incident actually was, as it turns out, is an attack that never took place at all. The entire incident, as has been all but officially acknowledged, was spun from whole cloth. This may seem a strange departure from the Jim Morrison story, but here are some things that you can't make up. One of the earliest on the Laurel Canyon/Sunset Strip scene is Jim Morrison, the enigmatic lead singer of The Doors. Jim will quickly become one of the most iconic, controversial, critically acclaimed, and influential figures to take up residence in Laurel Canyon. Curiously enough though, the self-proclaimed Lizard King has another claim to fame as well, albeit one that none of his numerous chroniclers will feel is of much relevance to his career and possible untimely death. He is the son, as it happens, of the aforementioned Admiral George Stephen Morrison. And so it is that, even while the father is actively conspiring to fabricate an incident that will be used to massively accelerate an illegal war, the son is positioning himself to become an icon of the anti-war crowd. Jim Morrison, who for a time lived in a home on Rothdale Trail, behind the Laurel Canyon Country Store, may or may not have died in Paris on July 3, 1971. The events of that day remain shrouded in mystery and rumor, and the details of the story, such as they are, have changed over the years. Jim Morrison was buried in a sealed coffin with no family or friends in attendance except his longtime, heroin addict girlfriend, Pamela Corson. Like Hendrix, Morrison had been an avid student of the occult, with a particular fondness for the work of Aleister Crowley. According to supergroupie Pamela Des Barres, he had also read all he could about incest and sadism. In the end, Jim Morrison, a student of psychedelic drugs, sexual freedom, and the occult, dies a very mysterious death in Paris, France. He becomes the perfect icon for the dawn of the New Age. Romans 8:12 So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live after the flesh. Romans 8:13 For if you live after the flesh, you must die, but if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Have a great week. Thanks.